Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Monday, September 9th, 2024. We are gathered for a morning work session, a 2-hour work session. We have up to 2 hours if needed. This is to get information, get an update regarding our 8th Judicial District Competency Docket and all the good work that folks are doing. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1. Joined by my commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2, and I believe Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3 is participating via phone. We also have our county manager, Lorinda Volker, and a lot of really smart-looking folks on the other side of the table. So I guess I'll turn it over to to Emily, if you would be kind enough to introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Emily Humphrey, and I'm the Director of Community Justice Alternatives. Today, we're very excited in this work session to talk about our competency docket. Believe it or not, we had a presentation to you all 3 years ago when we were talking about starting our competency docket, and we wanted to come back and let you know how far we've come in the process. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a roadmap of what this presentation is going to look like today. We're going to talk first about our introduction of our speakers today, and then we're going to do a very short synopsis of what is competency as a refresher from 3 years ago and what is restoration. And again, we gave a bigger one 3 years ago, but then we're really going to look at a day in the life of what it is to be an individual that walks through the competency docket, what that looks like. If you had a neighbor and a neighbor's child that went through competency, what would that look like moving forward? And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit more about how far we've come, the things that we've come forward. When we first started, we were the first competency docket in the state of Colorado. 10 other jurisdictions have now followed suit and now have competency dockets based on our gold standard. And then I also want to talk about our success stories. You're going to hear some incredible success stories. We put a lot of them in our presentation. We may not get to all of the success stories, but you'll have them because they're incredibly impactful and very unique. Each individual is unique in their success story and their path with mental health and criminal justice. And then at the end, I get to do the accolades and talk about all of the incredible awards that this team, not only as a team, but individually have been honored in regards to their work with competency. So that's kind of where we're headed today. And I'm going to start by introducing who you're going to hear from today because they're far smarter than me and they've got incredible things to talk about. But we're going to have Chief Judge Blanco, Susan Blanco here today. We have Matt Landers on my left, who's from some incredible success stories, who's been with the Public Defender's Office for 25 years. We're going to talk to Robert Oxmacher from the District Attorney's Office. Gene Klavansky, who is with CGA for one more day, and he is moving on to greener pastures with the state of Colorado. We're a little upset by that, but it's okay. We'll let him still present here today. We wish him well. Denise Cosgroves as well from the state. Callie Toll from Summit Stone, and Shannon Neeson from Homeward Alliance. And there's so many more individuals that are part of the competency docket, but these are part of the team that is going to talk with you today. Before we get started, this is a slide we had 3 years ago, but I think it's still as prevalent as it is today, is that individuals with serious mental illness are twice as likely to be arrested after leaving incarceration, specifically from the Department of Corrections. And again, a lot of Coloradoans aren't able to get the mental health treatment that they need, and sometimes they can only get it if they're justice involved, which is kind of sad to say. But we look at what is best. Is it incarceration versus medical care? What should we be doing and what is the best path? And what we've determined that incarceration is really not the answer. And the likelihood of incarceration for someone who is mentally ill versus hospitalization is 4 to 0. So most likely they're going to enter the criminal justice system. And so looking at this team, they've determined that we need to look at when mental health intersects criminal justice and what is the appropriate way to handle that. So this slide we had 3 years ago, but the numbers were vastly different. So 3 years ago, it said an estimated 60,000 competency evaluations were court-ordered each year. Since then, it's 130,000 competency evaluations are court-ordered each year. So that's risen tremendously. That's also because we're now recognizing that it's important to really address mental illness and justice involvement. So there's good and bad to both of that. But nearly 27.5 of these evaluations lead to someone being incompetent and unable to continue with their court case or their understanding of the criminal justice system. And roughly 35,750 defendants are found incompetent to stand trial in the U.S. each year. And this is a stat that I wanted to share. When we first, back in July of 2023, there were 460 individuals in jail across, not Larimer County, across the state that were waiting for a competency evaluation. And the time they spent in jail on average was 111.5 days to get an evaluation to determine whether or not they could move forward. Now, in July of 24, the number's gone down. And that's 227 individuals are in jail, and their average wait time is 80.3. And a very smart person, Denise Cosrose, talked to me. That shows the work that we're doing across the state, that we are bringing that number down. We are trying to address that with competency, with the competency docket, and getting folks out into the community rather than languishing in jail. If you look at the ordered in the month of July, in July of 2023, there was 191 individuals that were ordered to a competency evaluation and to restoration. And then in 2024, we continue to have 182 individuals ordered to competency evaluations across the state, and even more ordered to competency restoration. So we're still trying to help them out and connect them to resources to see what the best path for them is. So I'm done with my first part, and I'm going to turn it over to the experts, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt Landers to talk about just generically what is competency.
Good morning. I know I talked 3 years ago, and we kind of took a deep dive into the definition of competency, and so we'll just give kind of an overview, refresher on that. Competency is really composed of two different elements. The first is, does somebody have a factual understanding of the proceedings? So that would be, do they know definitions and what the roles of various people are in a courtroom? Do they know what the role of the prosecutor, the public defender is, and do they understand what their rights are in terms of the rights to go to trial or the rights to take a plea deal. The second component is the ability to effectively and rationally assist in their defense, and that sometimes is a more complicated prong for them to hit. A lot of times we'll have people that will be found not competent to proceed, maybe due to underlying cognitive deficits, where they don't even understand the first prong, which would be the factual understanding of the proceedings. A lot of times we'll have people that have severe mental illness that may not understand rationally what their defense would be. So even though they may know what the roles are, they may be delusional or have hallucinations about what the defense should be for trial. And so when competency is raised, it can be raised either by the defense counsel, the prosecution, or the court, and at that point in time when it's raised, an evaluation is ordered. And that evaluation could be an inpatient or an in-custody evaluation or an out-of-custody evaluation. And then the doctor will generally meet with them for about an hour and a half and write up about a 10-page report and make an assessment about whether they believe they're competent or not competent to proceed. If they're found incompetent to proceed, then on the flow chart, what happens is they would get ordered to do restoration. Restoration could be done either on an inpatient basis or an outpatient basis. If it's on an outpatient basis, that would be done through the Summit Stone forensic team. They would try to work with them on educational classes and help them understand where their deficits are to be restored back to competency. If they're ordered to inpatient restoration, then they would go to one of the locations affiliated with the state hospital in Pueblo. It could be at the actual hospital in Pueblo or someplace like Denver Hospital or Peakview Hospital or one of the other affiliated hospitals. And there they would undergo inpatient or in-custody restoration. Every 90 days, that is then reviewed to determine whether or not they have sort of attained competency and whether or not they're able to be restored back to competency. And that is the flow chart in terms of what the competency court process looks like. If ultimately someone cannot be restored to competency, then potentially the case could be dismissed. There's certain statutory timeframes affiliated with each of the charges. And so if they're unable to be restored in a certain amount of time, depending on the charge, it could be ripe for dismissal, potentially, in terms of the case. Once they are found competent to proceed, then the case shifts back into the trial division courtroom, where that individual can either enter into a plea deal or potentially go to trial. But they get referred into the competency docket with Judge Blanco whenever there are competency concerns, and then they remain on the docket to be connected with resources and the vast array of agencies that are here today that will talk about what they do. And so that is kind of the 10,000-foot overview on the competency process and kind of how the process flows.
Matt, thank you very much. Let's pause for a moment. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions, or Lorenda? I have a question. So I'm wondering, the initial decision raised by the court regarding the individual's competency, that is according to the flow chart, typically the defense attorney makes that recommendation. My question is, at that point, is a medical person or a psychologist or mental health person involved at that point?
What happens is once competency is raised, it triggers an evaluation being ordered by the courts, and then a doctor will get assigned. We have two doctors we work with primarily, Dr. Gale and Dr. Ort. They would then be assigned to meet with that individual and go in and meet with that individual to assess competency.
So that initial observation is made based on specific criteria and some of the things that you pointed out, Matt, regarding factual understanding of court proceedings and also being able to perhaps properly engage in the proceedings.
That's correct.
Okay.
And they also look at, for instance, at jail records to see how somebody's been doing while they're in custody, to sort of see if there's problematic behaviors or communication issues there. They also take a look at their history of competency and look to see kind of historically if this person's been involved in the competency process and what those underlying issues are.
Great. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Commissioner, please.
So what percentage of people are not able to be found competent to be able to stand trial or have that plea bargain? Is it a pretty small percentage?
Yeah, overall, it's a pretty small percentage, and Denise can maybe speak better to the statistics, but I think it's only like 1%, maybe 2% of the people that are criminally justice involved have competency raised. Of those people the 1% to 2% that come into the competency process, I would say the vast majority are able to be restored once the underlying issues are addressed, and that could be through restoration programs, them getting connected with Summit Stone, maybe getting on the right medications,
Sure.
or engaging in cognitive behavioral therapy and some other things that will help them sort of stabilize. There are some outliers, a very slim percentage of that slim 1% percentage, where it could be somebody that has cognitive deficits, where no matter how long they take restoration classes or how long they're engaged in Summit Stone, the reality is they're never going to be able to restore those underlying issues, such as low IQ, cognitive processing issues, things
Dementia,
like
maybe,
that. Dementia is one that we sort of see with our elderly populations. And so it sort of depends on what the root cause is that led to them being incompetent, because another one is drug-induced psychosis is one that we see, and that is one that sometimes just takes time for those drugs to get out of someone's system and gain more stability down the road as well.
Can I ask one
of
last?
course, yeah.
So so even a smaller percentage, I imagine, have to go to the state hospital or some of the other hospitals that you mentioned. So is that a very small percentage that would have to be hospitalized? And is there bed space? Is there, I think there have been concerns with some of that, so.
Yeah, that's so kind of two questions within there. If they are found what's called permanently incompetent to proceed at the initial evaluation, that's generally with those cognitive deficits. Right there at that initial evaluation and exploring something like civil commitment or exploring what resources they're connected with. If they are in custody and ordered to inpatient restoration, you're correct, the wait list to go to the state hospital has been extremely, extremely long. And so once that initial finding of incompetent to proceed comes in, we initially order it as inpatient restoration, and then our entire team will work on an outpatient restoration plan with an eye towards transitioning them into the community to try to get the work done in the community. And that's what Judge Blanco will be able to speak about, but she looks to see that there's a well-articulated plan that addresses the underlying issues so that if somebody does transition out into the community, to go through restoration. They have kind of a safety net and a team of resources wrapped around them.
Thank you.
And just a quick follow-up, a couple of questions that I wish to make. One is, and I think, Matt, you answered a question that I had, and that is, if a case is dismissed based on determining that the person is perhaps permanently incompetent, what happens to that person? And one of the options is that they are on the, they'll go to the Colorado Mental Health Hospital or some other facility. Is that what happens indefinitely, or?
That could happen. What happens more often is that there's a discussion with the district attorney and the county attorney about whether there should be some sort of civil certification procedure. That's something that we'll talk about later, that we're in the process of still building up that component of kind of what's going on. We also have some justice-involved individuals that we know historically have been permanently incompetent to proceed, that we then see come back into the system. And so we have kind of a good understanding on what their issues may be. And that would be an example where we try to deflect or avert those cases out to get them connected with the resources that we know that we need. And Mr. Oxmacher will discuss that in greater depth in a little bit.
And just my final comment, and that is regarding the matter of referring people at the state level for competency. I mean, there's a lawsuit that I don't know if enough progress is being made that helps address some of that lawsuit. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that. That was a few years ago, and that, I think, provided, to say the least, motivation to try to address some of these wait list issues. But then you also mentioned, Emily, that the work that's now being done as multiplying what we've done in Larimer County in, I think, 11 judicial districts, that's helping to relieve the pressure valve. In other words, if we're able to address some of that more at the local level, then perhaps the wait list is smaller, and the wait time from 111 days or whatever it was to 80 days. I mean, those are examples of progress. I don't know if any of you folks want to speak to that.
And I will say later on in the presentation, you will see statistics from Larimer County that talks about the shift from individuals who are waiting for restoration within the jail and how it's flipped to outpatient. And so it's been pretty incredible with the work. And part of that is because of the fines committee and the lawsuit that we're giving funding to support these efforts to do different things with individuals rather than having them just sit in jail. So you'll see that in a future slide.
Great, thanks, Emily. Let's continue, please.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Maybe we'll pause for a moment, yes.
Well, I think I heard
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, sorry, it's kind of hard for me to, yeah.
I've been trying to ask questions, sir, if I might. I am very interested in this. I'm just trying to be three places at once today. So apologies, this is really important to me. I have a question I'm hoping you'll address, is the cost of them being permanently incompetent, and who helps the cost, and then also the cost savings with the full restoration of these folks. And I'm assuming this will be brought up. My other questions were already answered that Commissioner Stevens asked my questions. So I'm just curious if the costs will be brought up in the future with the rest of the information you're bringing forward. Thank you.
I don't necessarily think we don't have a slide specifically on cost, but what I can tell you is the cost of a typical jail bed day versus out in the community is and then that goes without saying. We also have new competency beds that are within ASD. So we're having 10 individuals that you'll talk about in the future that are coming out instead of languishing in jail. They're sitting over in work release, getting connected to resources, which again is cost saving to the taxpayers. So, and then obviously connecting individuals to Summit Stone and Medicaid and other things that are good resources to try to kind of divert them from the criminal justice system together is also cost savings. But Commissioner Shattuck McNally, we don't necessarily have a slide for that. I can try to look into that if you'd like me to.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Is there anything else?
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, we'll do our best to kind of hold our questions because they may be addressed as we move forward. And I'm sure we reviewed the slides, but it's good to be reminded of what's in the presentation.
So good morning, I'm Callie Toll with Summit Stone. I'm going to talk a little bit about restoration and what it is. And really my focus will be on the outpatient side of restoration because that's what we provide within Summit Stone. And so when we talk about outpatient restoration, it really is a focus on educating an individual on the court process. And so it is a mandated curriculum that is used across the state of Colorado, and that's what we utilize in regards to competency restoration education. Court-ordered outpatient restoration is really that education component. But what we know within, for these clients is that they need more than just the education in order to create the stability in their life to restore that competency. And so within our programming, we also provide therapeutic services, medication management, which includes psychiatric as well as MAT, so for substance use disorders, case management services, and peer services. So try and create as much as possible wraparound services within that outpatient setting to provide the resources that they need to restore that competency and really be able to absorb the education that they're receiving. This slide is really just a visual to show the different components and areas in which Summit Stone is helping support with our county partners and state partners various places for competency services. And so some of that is within our Larimer County Jail, and so we have some partnership within the jail to provide psychiatric services and medication management in partnership with Core Health and Larimer County Jail, and that includes therapeutic and case management support. We then support the competency docket, and you can see all of the partners included in that, and I think that's actually grown. I'm not sure that all of our partners are even on that slide at this point. And then our outpatient competency restoration education, and all of our partners there. So really, this work cannot be done with all of the people who are at the table to support the clients. It takes all of us to really meet the needs of this population.
And I'm going to turn this over to Jean and to Judge. We started this in May of 2021, and again on this slide it talks about 10 other jurisdictions have followed suit. If you look at this picture, and you remember this was at Admin Matters when we received the Visionary Award, but when we brought this to you 3 years ago, there was a core group of folks, maybe 5 or 6, that were part of the competency team. And if you can look at this photo, this is the competency team now, and not everyone was present. So it is such a collaborative approach here in Larimer County. All different entities coming together for doing the right thing for the right purpose. And so just wanted to show you that photo because we have come a tremendous way and have made a huge impact in our community and across the state. So I'm going to turn it over to Judge Blanco and Jean.
Right. Thank you so much, Emily. And the next slide that's up here just really kind of goes through who is on the team. And it's such an extensive group of community partners that there's actually 2 slides dedicated to it. But obviously, we're grateful that the district attorney and public defender have dedicated people to this docket. It's very important for the people to be versed and understand the population, the very specific areas of law. It's not just criminal law. As mentioned earlier, they're learning how to pivot into civil commitments and so forth. And then you can see we've had the criminal justice alternatives folks involved all along the way, and Emily will talk a little bit further about how that's expanded. The statewide Bridges program has expanded. Denise Cosgrove is now in charge of our region for that program. And then we have had a lot of success bringing in new partners. So Core Health is listed here. Shannon's here from Homeward Alliance. We're very grateful for her work. What's interesting is we had Dr. Gale and Dr. Ort since the beginning. They're the ones that are dedicated evaluators for us. We have some others, but these 2 are dedicated. They'll be at the courthouse on the 3rd floor doing evaluations, whether in the jail or on the 3rd floor. But what's new is Dr. Ziegler from Summit Stone's team. He not only is doing medication for folks that are in the jail, but he's providing consistent care so that they can build a rapport with him. They don't have to see a different doctor every time. And then when folks come out of the jail, they can continue to see Dr. Ziegler. And I can tell you in court, that makes a huge difference for the people that are coming in. I see more people being medication compliant, and I think it has a lot to do with the relationship they build with the doctor. And when they hear that they can keep seeing Dr. Z after they leave, they're excited and grateful for that. So that's a big deal for us. On the next slide, you can see that we have our forensic navigator, Rocky Mountain Human Services, the county attorney is involved. Disabled Resources came to one of the warrant clearance events, and we were able to make connection with them and then invited them to join us, and they've been actively involved in helping support the work that we do. ARC's been there all along the way. Obviously, Murphy Center and Loveland Resource Center, we can't say enough about. They give us space to meet with people. They help us, just support the population to the best of their ability. Same with the library. A lot of our customers, clients like to be at the library, and that's a nice place for us to meet folks. Foothills Gateway, medication management, the VA, a variety of sober living agencies that have come forth, Outreach Fort Collins, the co-response team. So when we say it takes a village, Callie's slide is a little outdated, but if you put all of our partners on there, we would probably absorb the whole slide just with that one section of it, which is really exciting because when you ask, and Commissioner Shattuck McNally had asked the cost savings, when you think about the individual and how these services can wrap around, the whole community is taking part in working to support someone. The goal is that we don't have recidivism, that the person does not keep coming back into the system, and that they're getting the care that they deserve and need so that they're not involved any longer in the criminal justice system. Then our goal is to be effective. Our goal is to be efficient, so we streamline the process. Everybody is kind of a master of the trade because they're every week working on these issues, and so they become very specialized. And I will say, to the credit of that team, they're identifying what is the goal for this individual, because it's not a traditional goal where you normally are cited with a charge that you have done something in violation of the law, and then one side is prosecuting, one side is defending, and you see that adversarial system in the criminal justice system come to life. But here, the team is really identifying what is the goal. Sometimes it may be that the district attorney has a goal for public safety, that they are anticipating full restoration so that they can litigate this case to its fullest. But sometimes you'll see them shift gears and see that there might be a different alternative that they think serves the community well. And you'll see the same thing from our public defender's office. They kind of shed their traditional roles and look into, what would best serve this client so that they don't keep coming back into the system. And so everyone breaking their traditional roles to look at what is the identified goal in a particular case helps us to be able to move a person through and support them to the best of our ability. And what you see is really expedited access. When you have everybody at the table, the individual is able to receive the care and help they need without having to, as a person, go find all these agencies, coordinate your own care, particularly for the population that's been described to you. And having everybody at the table increases the communication the stakeholders need to be able to really effectively wrap services around. Because then we figure out where we are deficient. For example, if it's a transportation issue, everyone's around the table and somebody might be able to help fill that gap for the individual. So the communication also extends to family and community supports. If you come to court on a Thursday morning, there's moms, aunts, uncles, people that are in the community, maybe from, their church, that are just trying to support folks through the process, and our team will work collaboratively with them. And I think what happens over time is it really does build trust with the community. It builds trust for the individual who's been accused, that everybody really is here trying to help you. And over time, they start to engage more in the process because, believe it or not, people don't enter criminal justice system thinking, yay, I'm here to get help. So it takes us a little while to break that barrier down to be able to communicate and work well with their families and with them. And overall, our goal is to keep the community safe and decrease recidivism, trying to get people connected with appropriate places for care. And those places are places that you do not have to be criminal justice involved to continue to be able to maintain that support.
So in this slide, we kind of want to... There we go. In this slide, we want to kind of do a roundtable discussion about a day in the life of the competency docket and what that looks like, and all of these partners together. So anyone can chime in. We'll start out with Jean and Judge Blanco in regards to walking someone through the competency docket and what that looks like for them.
Sure. So just to add to what everyone's been saying, well, we try to aim for our individualized care, what's best for the individual, and like Judge said, maybe there is criminal justice involvement that makes sense. However, each person would benefit from something else. So our team, when we know they're being pulled into the docket, we go into the jail, we meet them in the community and do needs assessments, screens, see what would help this individual. We don't share that information with others, but we get plenty of releases, and we start making referrals to agencies as soon as possible. They might have court 3-4 weeks after that, so we build rapport, we make connections, we try to explain the process. So one of our huge successes are scheduled competency evaluations that happen Wednesday morning right next to Judge Blanco's courtroom. They're in a conference room. They see the forensic evaluator. We help them get there. Summit Stone helps them get there. It's a team effort to get people into that building. And I think we're over 90% success rate of getting that community competency evaluation. Without step one, we can't get to the other steps. So that's a huge win for us. But again, in the meantime, we build rapport, we make referrals. If they're unhoused, we get Homeward Alliance involved as soon as possible. Shannon does her magic. If they would benefit from medications, we try to get Summit Stone involved. So the ball's rolling early. As soon as we get that email from the clerks, we know, we need to jump in and do what we can. And we'll get into other Larimer County services soon, but Larimer has cars. We drive people to these appointments. These folks may be dealing with mental health, dementia. Sometimes they're not great at remembering appointments. So we might call them 2 days beforehand. Hey, we'll pick you up at 10. We'll take you over. So even if they don't remember where we're taking them, they know we're going to show up. That rapport and consistency is a huge part of our success as a team. They trust us. They know, we have their best care, interests in mind. So, we work with the court system, but we're not part of the court system. We always say we don't work for the DA, we don't work for the public defender. We're here to help you through this process. And again, our reputation is out there and people trust us. And again, we pick someone up from Catholic Charities, drive them to court, drive them to restoration classes. Recently, I think in March, Homeward Alliance became an official member of our team. They've been on the sidelines for a while, but again, Shannon does surveys that get them on the CAPS list. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's step one. It's a long list, unfortunately, but just getting on the list helps the process. So we're out there looking for the gaps, trying to fill the gaps. And, in the 3 years, yes, there's new partners. That's because we've realized, this is an issue. How do we fix this issue? And I'm sure in another 3 years, they'll look different, but hopefully there's less gaps, and that's the goal. But I'll stop talking and hand it over to others.
Does anyone want to talk about the population that we serve?
In terms of the population, historically we're dealing with folks that have severe and persistent mental illness, meaning that they've had some type of major psychiatric diagnosis for a long period of time, or it could be some sort of, as I said earlier, cognitive deficit issue. And so often they may have previously had some connection to Summit Stone, which is very helpful to have that continuity of Summit Stone having worked with them previously in the community, and then they're able to work with them in the competency system, and then able to work with them after they exit the competency system. And so the reality is that severe mental illness impacts every aspect of society. So we have some people that it's not just people that are indigent, it's some people that are very successful professionals. It could be anybody that suffers from some type of issue that leads to them coming into our system, including the neurocognitive deficits for some people that decline when they're older, or some people that have one-time psychotic disorders that are in their 40s that come in that haven't been seen there. So it's a real variety in terms of who we deal with. but by and large, it's people that have severe and persistent mental illness.
And I was just going to comment too, that comes with all the other things that come with that territory, because when you have severe persistent mental health issues, if you don't have adequate support in the community to connect you to resources, then you're talking about people that are houseless and folks that are struggling to, figure out transportation pieces. I mean, look at the list of partners, but if on your own you had to call and figure out if you're appropriate client for each of those places, make an appointment, get transportation. I mean, if you don't have a phone, if you don't have a way to get around. Recently, in one of our other courts, in our wellness court program, we have somebody who is a participant in Loveland. She was taking 5 buses to come to Fort Collins. So we have barriers in our community, and the team helps overcome those. But I feel like the population, when we talk about them, you might think about it just like it's almost the deck is stacked. I mean, every one of those demographics creates a different kind of challenge for the individual, making it more important to have a collaborative team.
All right. So I'm from the district attorney's office. We have 2 prosecutors dedicated to the team. I'm one of those 2 prosecutors. And our goal from a prosecution perspective ultimately is to do justice. And that can mean a lot of things. It can mean holding an individual accountable for breaking the law. It can mean doing whatever we can to assure public safety. It could mean making sure that the victim's voice is heard, that the victim's made whole, that the harm that was committed was restored. And that lens of what is justice, you can either take a very narrow perspective, which is right now, today, how do we keep the community safe? And if you take that narrow perspective, of course, well, having this individual incarcerated in the jail today achieves that one goal today. But if you take a broader view, and look at 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, how do we achieve that goal? Of course, for most cases, the truth is address the underlying issues, support the individual, make sure that they're connected with the community resources that are out there. And so in taking that broader view, oftentimes we look at not necessarily the punitive aspect, but that long-term solution-based aspect. And so we look for a number of ways to accomplish that. You hear terms like diversion and deflection tossed around. Those can mean different things in different jurisdictions. Oftentimes, deflection is the idea that you take someone, have them never enter the criminal justice system, and you deflect them into community-based resources. And I think ideally, that's what we would like to see. But unfortunately, for a number of the individuals that we serve in competency court, their condition has led them to the point that they are collecting oftentimes not one, but multiple criminal charges. And so once they're in our system, we look at a couple of different options from the DA perspective. One is for folks that are not in the competency system, we have a robust adult diversion program in the DA's office, and one specific track of that which is focused on behavioral health. And so oftentimes individuals are able to participate in that program. The diversion idea being that although they kind of briefly enter the criminal justice system, ultimately we're still trying to divert them away from that. So that's an option for us. But oftentimes folks, because of their competency, aren't in a place to be able to enter our diversion program. And so they end up on the competency docket. For these folks, especially folks with low-level offenses, traditionally what happened to them is they would pick up multiple offenses. Judges would say, if I release you on bond, you're going to continue to offend, you're going to be back here. So these folks end up getting held without a bond. Competency is raised, and then they enter this kind of state hospital waiting game system where the law is such that the time that it would take them to have an evaluation and be successfully restored is longer than what the law allowed them to be incarcerated for. And so we saw folks entering the system, essentially being warehoused, and then their case would time out, and they would be returned to society with pretty much exactly the same situation we were in before. One of the programs that we as a team came up with that is a DA-led effort is our what we call aversion program, AVERT, which is a fun acronym with the intent of kind of doing a warm handoff to community-based services with the, usually in coordination with a plan that the team has come up with the end goal, similar to diversion, of having their case be dismissed, but still have the support of the team while they're engaged in this. So the AVERT acronym is A for avoid new charges, V for verify assistance eligibility, whether that's medical, housing, or community assistance, E, engage with the competency court team, R, return to court, and then T, talk to Summit Stone. And we've had great success where folks enter into this AVERT agreement with us. That's typically a 30 to 90-day agreement, depending on what we're asking them to do. We'll talk a little bit here in a moment, but sometimes we make things like participation in the STIRT program a condition of that agreement, including the aftercare that follows that. So we've had a lot of great success with this program, and it's given us kind of one other option to hopefully accomplish public safety in this supportive rather than punitive way. Like many things, our judicial district has led the charge here, and we are now seeing state programs come in and kind of do what we've already been doing here. And so some of the things that were just passed at the state level in this last year are two different statutes that now will take any individual who has charged with a Class 2 misdemeanor or below, once their case is, once they are determined to be incompetent, their case will now be dismissed. And the idea there at the state level is to kind of remove these low-level cases from the queue in terms of getting folks to the state hospital so that we can maybe focus on some of the higher-level cases. There are some opportunities to, before the case is dismissed, to do things like referral for potential civil commitment. That at the state level is still something that's very much a work in progress. There are individuals who, due to their mental health, are violating the law, but that their condition would not qualify them for civil commitment because they are not gravely disabled or they do not currently present a danger to themselves or others. Right, so it's leading to unlawful behavior, but would not rise to that level. So there is a gap there that still needs to be worked on. The other thing at the state level that happened this year is a broad expansion of the Bridges program, including the development of what in legislation is called the Bridges Wraparound Program. Bridges is going to, it sounds like, actually rebrand this or phrase it as a diversion program. But this will be a program that individuals who are competent or are incompetent or likely to be found incompetent would be eligible for the program. It is something that requires DA approval. So if there's a case that we had significant community safety concerns due to the level of the charge or the history or whatever, we could elect not to filter them into this program. But it will be a state level program that will come with resources. It's 182 days long, with the intent of doing some of the similar things that we've been doing in AVERT and diversion. Where if the individual is successful and participates in this program, the end result is dismissal of their charges. If they do not engage, they do not participate, we do still have the option of terminating that Bridges wraparound agreement, returning them to the restoration process, and if needed, continue with prosecution.
And like we touched on, part of the beauty of working in Larimer are already the established programs, the connections, the smooth transitions. So the first two are actually grant funded by the special masters, like we talked about before. So our competency team, competency services through Larimer County is grant funded. That's term limited. But we have a team of 5 right now, and we've pivoted a little bit after the Bridges expansion to focus on higher acuity individuals. Maybe they have intellectual disabilities, maybe high needs through mental health, unhoused, the higher acuity. We assist in all parts of the process, so we've set up our tablets to complete an evaluation in our office, in the courthouse, at Murphy Center, at Summit Stone. So again, we try to fill the gaps, and if technology's the issue, we'll come to you with a tablet. We have transportation, we have vehicles, we get people to appointments. Medication for me is a huge win, because before working with Summit Stone and having other grant funded, we had to make sure the jail called in the medications to a pharmacy of the client's choice, go to the pharmacy with the client, find a way to pay for the medications. I mean, it was hours if it worked well. Now, with Summit Stone, they call it into Genoa, which is on Center. We drive there, pick up a bag of meds, and then meet the individual at the jail with their current 30 days. I mean, that's huge, because like I said, there were many parts to the process before. Now we make a phone call, grab the meds 2 hours later, and then meet that individual. So for me, that's huge, because obviously having meds for a lot of these folks is key to success. So again, the first program is funded through Special Masters, and again, with the pivot, we've also were able to receive funds for 10 beds in work release. The goal is to pull people out of jail, mostly, that would have been stuck there for months without other options, people that we didn't think would be successful at the shelter on their own. So they're obviously supervised. We work downstairs, so we run up and check on these folks. We drive them to their appointments, court-appointed appointments. That's transitional. And we just started in, I think July was our first individual, and it's a huge win for us. I think we're the second work release alternative sentencing unit in Colorado to do that.
And I would just mention that Mesa County was the first one to do the competency beds. They call it a pre-CAPS program. So about a year and a half ago, my colleague in Weld County, myself, and in Boulder, we went down to Mesa County for a couple of days and found out about their program, and then brought it back here and wrote a special master's grant for these 10 competency beds. And again, with these competency beds as a transitional housing, it's a great opportunity to bring in Homeward Alliance, so that as soon as they come to us, they get connected to Homeward Alliance, so that we're working on a more permanency plan than just sitting at ASD. But this is pre-plea. So this is the first time in Larimer County history that we've had individuals in our work release program pre-plea with the regular population.
Thank you. And lastly, START we touched on. So Misty Perry, hiding behind that tree back there, was able to have us be the first one in the state actually to have pre-plea folks go through treatment programs. So 3-week drug and alcohol treatment with aftercare. So again, someone that might have been stuck in the jail, DA, public defender, if they're on board, yes, let's pull them out, let's put them through START. They need that stability, they need those new tools, and once they're out, hopefully they stay out, so they start doing restoration after that. I mean, it's a huge step, and like I said, it's first one in the state, and it provides people before plea, they agree to go through the program, it's voluntary, But that's a huge win for us as well.
And I would say just, I know you always ask, but pre-plea means an individual has not been found guilty yet. They haven't entered a plea. So this STIRT program, which is a pilot program, is not just for competency. So if a defense attorney or a private attorney or even a district attorney's office has an individual who is awaiting resolution of their case but is in need of treatment, they can apply to see whether they meet the standard to get in, and that's evaluations that Misty can talk about, whether they screen in to do our STIRT program. We've just had the benefit of these individuals that are part of the competency docket coming out into the STIRT program, and if they still don't have housing after that 21 days, they'll be able to go into our transitional beds within ASD.
Gene, before we move on, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that caseworkers or providers that have access to medication, whether they're administering the medication in a, for example, skilled nursing facility, they have to have a certain level of certification. What assurances do we provide when you're picking up medications with the individual at the pharmacy that you mentioned, that everything is being secured and, ultimately the medication is being administered properly?
Mm-hmm. So if they work in work release, there's a process. We would hand the sealed bag to the worker, the staff at ASD, and they keep them locked at night. The client comes up to the desk and asks for his medications. We also have a lock box in our office that we lock overnight if we have to wait. I think Summit Stone obviously has protocols and Genoa has protocols. So the bag is sealed. It has the prescription on top. We don't open the meds. I mean, we sometimes just hand the meds over to the client if they're not going to ASD, but we keep them locked in work release. There's a process that's locked overnight as well, and I think Callie has some.
Thank you, Gene. Yes.
And I would just add, so if a client is not in work release and needs medication administration, we would work and probably do that within Summit Stone to figure out how to administer the medications with our medical assistants or nursing staff through one of our facilities. So we do have that option, and we do a lot of injectable medications for this population, and they can do that within the location where our competency services are located.
Thank you both.
And, I mean, you touched on a concern. If someone is not in the jail or being supervised, it's on them to take their medications. We obviously encourage them to follow orders, but sometimes they choose to stop taking medications, and that's when we see their mental health pop up again. But if they're out of the jail, they're free citizens. They can live their life the way they choose, but we want them to have access to their medications. So lastly, about Larimer, I mean, we've talked about how progressive and forward-thinking Larimer is. We have amazing programs. We're just part of this huge system. Moving forward, the goal is a lot of these folks might qualify for AIM and Wellness Court and other post-plea programs. So, we all work together, and Misty supervises a lot of those, so luckily we can make that as smooth as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Denise Cosgrove with, can you hear me? With Bridges of Colorado. So prior to this role, I was with the Office of Civil and Forensic Mental Health, also working with this team when we implemented it. And I've been in this role for about 5 months now. So Bridges came around in 2018 through Senate bill, and it placed a court liaison in each judicial district. Some had one, some had two. Larimer County had one, and that was housed under the county at the time. The Bridges liaisons really act as a neutral party to walk alongside the person in the case, to be able to give them agency, to be able to do assessments and determine what their needs are. And then I kind of like to think of it like Legos, like Bridges is just, right, Lego piece connecting them to the different services that exist and helping to get them through competency process while engaging them in the community to all of the resources that they need. Due to the success of the program, it was expanded and became its own agency. And that increased Bridges from probably, I think they were around 30 to about 90. So all across the state, the judicial districts were expanded the capacity for Bridges statutorily. Our priority is the competency population. So in Larimer County, we have 5 Bridges staff. 4 of them are working in this docket. 1 of them will be working with the juvenile competency docket. And I guess just partnering on what everybody has said here is when we have people come to observe our docket in Larimer that is trying to be duplicated across the state, one of the things that they always mention is really just the collaboration that we have here. And so really it's very much a collaborative effort. Like across the state, there's not any county that has partnered in the way that Larimer County has partnered with the Judicial Department to come up with all of the programs that we have that we were talking about with the case managers, the ASD beds, the STIRT program. And so it's really been instrumental to have that partnership and that collaboration, not only for where we've gone, but also to where we're going. So when Bridges has wraparound care coming out, that's also going to be, it's a vulnerable population, but they're fragile. Like they're resilient, but very fragile and have a lot of high needs. And so that partnership that we have is very instrumental, and it takes really so many people and so many resources to connect the people. So. Yeah.
And the one thing that I would say is, I think it was last week or the week before, Special Masters came up and they brought a team from Oregon and a team from Wisconsin to talk about our programs and to see what we did and ask some questions of this team, and it was very nice to do that. When we started talking about Larimer County and all of the resources that we provide for non-traditional forms of incarceration, they were kind of floored, and they stopped and they asked me specifically, so you work for the state, right? These are state programs. And I said, no, these are not state programs. These are Larimer County programs. So it was quite amazing for them to see the great things that we've done in Larimer County with all the partners sitting next to us and collaboratively working together. And with the expansion of Bridges, it just makes our program even stronger. It allows us to continue to have our local control, to be able to pivot and do things that's right for our jurisdiction, but to have extra resources so that no one is kind of left behind or slipping through the cracks. So the partnership with the state has been wonderful, but it's also nice to continue to have our local connections and our collaborations with our partners sitting here today.
Hi, I'm Shannon Nissen. I'm with Homeward Alliance. I started this position back in March, and it's really been wonderful to work with this team. Homeward Alliance has been able to fill in, I think, a lot of gaps. I'm able to go into the jail and do housing assessments with people, which we weren't able to do before. We have funding for sober living. We help with, transitional housing. Once they are like in the ASD beds, I'm able to go there and help with document readiness. So I kind of do a little bit of everything, resource navigation, helping get birth certificates and IDs and everything that you would need when applying for long-term housing. And our first and biggest goal that we had when we first received this grant was to get everybody that needed a housing assessment to get that done within the first quarter, or to get, I think, 50% of the people done within the first quarter, and we got everyone their housing assessment, and then we came up with a pretty streamlined referral process. So that as soon as an individual is, referred to competency, if they are unhoused, they get referred to me right away, and I get to do that housing assessment as soon as possible. So get them on that housing list. It's been really wonderful. I think sober living and stuff like that, we have not had a lot of funding for before. So it's been really great to be able to help out in that capacity.
What are some
Chair?
examples? I have a question for Shannon, excuse me. What's an example of short-term housing and what's an example of long-term housing?
Sure. So short-term housing can look anything like helping someone apply for a long-term residency bed at Catholic Charities or the Fort Collins Rescue Mission. I would consider sober living short-term housing. Long-term housing will look more like helping somebody obtain a voucher and working on applying for units with that. I've also helped with like eviction prevention, so someone that's in long-term housing about to lose it, I was able to help get them into more secure housing afterwards.
I think Commissioner Shattuck McNally
Oh,
has a
Commissioner Shattuck McNally. How do you know that? How come I don't?
There. In terms of housing, maybe the vouchers or programs, where is that being funded? Through your program or through the state? And are you looking at any other opportunities through other grant programs, like maybe the regional abatement councils or other grantees or grantors? Excuse me. I'm just curious because I know that I've heard this before that sober living housing or housing is really a big issue for the success of these individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Homeward Alliance right now, this funding is through fines. But part of the housing assessment I do gets these folks on a coordinated entry list. So they're on a list for everywhere in northern Colorado that has resources. Some of those could be rapid rehousing. Some of those could be different types of vouchers. So once that housing assessment is done, it really expands what resources these individuals may be able to obtain.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition to everyone's favorite stats. So since January 2022, our team, Larimer County, has served 670 people. It's divided by program, but all those were under the Larimer umbrella. Some of those, unfortunately, are return clients, but like we touched on, we have a history with these people. We have contact information. We might have worked with mom 2 years ago, so it's quicker. We can jump into the services. But in the last 2.5 years, 670 people have worked with our case managers, provided services, connected them to resources. And just last year, 111 charges have been dismissed. Some of those are due to statutes or timelines, not just for the interest of justice. But the system is smoother and more efficient because of the docket and conversations we had. So if a DA understands that there is a plan waiting for somebody and they're a group home or mom's willing to let them live there, they might be more flexible or take risks because of the trust that this team has built. And the last one, I think, is huge as well. So just in 2023, 28 individuals were released from the jail. They're on the list to go to Pueblo. Might have taken 8-9 months to get there, but again, due to the team and resources, the order was changed from an inpatient restoration order to outpatient. So 28 people just last year walked out of the jail, worked with our team, hopefully lived somewhere safe, and were ordered to do outpatient. Without this team being here, 28 people and more would have been stuck in the jail just waiting, languishing. So due to what we do, those people were not stuck in jail.
I just want to
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that. So when we're looking at that number 28, it costs almost $1,000 a day to have somebody at the state hospital. So if you have somebody at the state hospital and they're being reassessed in 90 days, you have $90,000 for one person, and they're not always restored within those 90 days. So it's a huge cost savings, and everything that we're doing here in this county is giving the court options to be able to put people in the community instead of having people go to this system called the state hospital to be restored. So I just wanted to put that point out to everyone.
And I just want to make one brief point with respect to the dismissals. I will tell you that the vast majority of these, over 95% of those, are dismissals where our office, the prosecutor, were supportive of the dismissal. And oftentimes that is because we see the person that came to competency court originally, and we see where they're at after 3, 6, 9, 12 months. We see that they've put in a lot of work. We see that they're in a much better place. We know that they have spent some time in custody. But oftentimes the work that we see there, they earn this dismissal. And it's something that, from a public safety perspective, we actually feel very comfortable that they're in a much better place now, and that we've kind of achieved that justice goal. I will note that some of these dismissals are also folks that came through like the AVERT program or were restored to competency, and then we were able to put them in another program that allowed for dismissal, like our behavioral health diversion program, for example.
And I would just add on the cost savings, obviously if folks are perhaps languishing in jail unnecessarily, there are costs associated with that are much more significant than if they're out in the community safely, to the public and to themselves, getting the care and treatment and support that they need.
One other thing I just wanted to interject about the dismissals that's interesting is that when we started out only taking in felony cases. And so looking at that slide, the court can see the commissioners can see how many cases were dismissed that were misdemeanors that previously were not part of our docket. And then the third category is the municipal cases. And so even though the municipal court isn't a partner on a regular docket, we've formed a relationship where I'll reach out to the prosecutors from Fort Collins and Loveland to inform them and say, heads up, this person has multiple municipal infractions such as littering or these other small things, and they're already incompetent in our system, and then they will dismiss those when they learn that information. Whereas before, what was happening is a lot of these people were getting tripped up on these municipal infractions where they would miss court, they wouldn't show up. They didn't know how to advocate for themselves or explain the relationship between the competency process from district court and county court to the prosecutor. So they'd have warrants, they'd end up back in jail, further destabilized. And so now that gap has been bridged, which is actually a very important gap for a lot of these people with those municipal cases. Even though they're not as serious, they're really kind of a hurdle that creates destabilization that now we are better remedying.
Thank you. And great points. And Commissioner, you're right. It's not just a financial cost on these people. They struggle, and because the team tries to find resources, hopefully they're in a better place a couple months after we enter their lives. So I agree. And services. So a service is not just handing someone a pamphlet. We keep track in our data system. Anytime a case manager provides a service, we keep track and we keep numbers. So a service could be a ride to an appointment, a ride to court, could be making a referral to an agency, filling out the application with the client. So again, it's not just, hey, here's a pamphlet, that counts. So it's efforts that our case managers put in that would not have been there without this team. So again, in the last 2.5 years, our team provided over 2,600 services to clients we've worked with. Just this year, we've provided 1,500, and we didn't run all the numbers, but just 1,500 either basic needs, so that's housing related, medical, behavioral health, communication. We have phones in our program or grant funded, so if a person does not have a phone, we set that up, we provide them a phone, rides, housing. So just this year, in the past 8 months, we've provided 1,500 services to the people we work with. And again, these are things that would not have been completed unless this team was here.
And in preparation for this, I was meeting with Matt, and he gave a beautiful example that one of our case managers, April Moore, picked up 2 of his clients that day to take them to have a meeting with Matt. And so statistically, if someone had picked them up, given them a ride, brought them to Matt, most likely they might have missed that appointment because they didn't have the stability to be able to get that, or the barrier to get to him. So that's just an example of kind of going above and beyond to make sure that that person is successful throughout this process and connecting to as many resources as possible.
Thank you. And the last one we kind of touched on, but this is the progress we've made. So September of 2021, 55% of restoration orders were in custody. These are people that had to stay in the jail until Pueblo was ready to get them. And again, probably 6 months of waiting. And just a couple months ago, that's down to 39% of the population that's waiting in the jail. And then kind of flipped the other way. So 3 years ago, only 45% of the people were doing restoration in the community. And now we have that up to 61%. Obviously, we want to keep climbing, but that's a huge shift just in three years. And then evaluations is the second piece. So 63% of people were waiting in the jail for a forensic evaluator to come complete their eval. And now that's down to 41% a couple months ago. And again, the other part flipped. So only 37% of evaluations were completed in the community. Now almost 60% are done in the community, again, due to the team and the efforts and organizing the process. So that's huge for us as well.
And I would say this is my favorite slide because this shows how much progress we've made because of Judge Blanco and her leadership and all of the folks on the team to have these flips from having more in custody now, more out of custody, getting the services they need. This is a tremendous effort. And that's why I think folks are looking around the state to Larimer County and how we're doing things and the collaboration. Okay. There we go. This is for everyone. Would you like to start, Judge?
Yeah.
Right, so I think our public defender, Matt Landers, kind of touched on this, that we expanded. It seemed kind of unfair that if you had a felony, you could come to court on a Thursday morning and have all these resources in the courtroom collaborating to support you. But if you had a misdemeanor, you would not have access to this type of collaboration. So we had made an effort last summer to open the doors for anyone that had competency issues to be able to come regardless of what their classification of misdemeanor was, and they got added. That was a huge undertaking and required a little bit of pivoting for all of us to kind of understand. As Mr. Oxmacher has explained, there are some timeframes around each of the cases. So if a misdemeanor case comes in, we have less time to work with somebody. So we change the way that we support the individuals on that docket and how we use community resources. For example, we may not immediately order that evaluation that Commissioner Kafalis, you're asking about. If we immediately have the doctor go evaluate someone when the referral is made, we may not do that on a misdemeanor because the truth is by the time we get the eval back, they already may have timed out of our system. And so we have to be a little more thoughtful around those cases. And we have seen, obviously, a huge change in all of the number of people. I mean, I know Denise just spoke about now we went from 1 Bridges person to 5 in Larimer County. The county has started specializing and working with high acuity needs folks and opening up different programming that, you know, Emily and Jean have talked about. And so we've seen a lot of increase in case management. And the doctors love it. When you don't have to chase people in the community to do the evaluations, having over 90% participation rate, we wouldn't be there if it wasn't for all of these case managers helping people get to the appointments, reminding them, driving them, what have you. But that is a huge increase in the number of people that are doing the evaluations. That's what makes it an option to do it outpatient and change those statistics because people are showing up. We talked about the Summit Stone medication consistency and continuity of care from inside the jail to out, which has been huge. And sorry, I'm kind of just ad-libbing as we go. Am I doing okay? Go ahead.
You're doing great. And I want to give a huge shout out to pretrial services. Lynette's back there. I mean, they're definitely a huge partner with the docket and also our team They're focused on compliance. However, the information's about safety and if they might benefit from sober living or drug and alcohol services, then our team would look for that. But we're housed right next to pretrial services. They're a huge partner. Lynette's been, a huge part of the growth and sharing information. But again, towards the bottom, there's so many other great programs in Larimer County that the connections and the process makes it smoother. So once someone's deemed competent, the process, the pause button is lifted, and they can go back to court and talk about other options. But like our DA said, if they've been cooperative, if they're doing these amazing things, it probably opens up even more resources than if they were just stuck in jail not doing anything. So just, the cooperation and the process really helps create other options as well.
One other thing I wanted to bring up, just to piggyback up on Lynette, who's been a really key collaborator, is that she helped to set up when somebody's initially arrested and comes back into the criminal justice system. On the bond applications, we have a competency docket indicator where it'll be flagged if somebody previously had competency docket experience. And so historically what would happen is somebody would be rearrested. They would then be funneled into a random courtroom in the jurisdiction based upon where it was distributed to. They would then land with a public defender that didn't know them and a district attorney that didn't know them. And then a very long time down the road, they would eventually learn that there were competency issues and raise the competency issue. But due to Lynette and her integrating this into the system, now at the time that somebody is initially arrested, there will be a competency services stamp that gets flagged, which then the public defender that's in bonds that day and the district attorney that's in bonds that day will notify each of our respective agencies. So immediately upon arrest, we'll say, oh, look, this person came back into the system, because we get a printout of that. So we're immediately catching these and then immediately able to funnel them back in where we all know who they are and we already know their team, as Jean said. So the efficiency cuts out many, many weeks or months that somebody may have just sort of floated through the system without us having them on the radar.
So something I would,
Mr. Chairman, ask a question?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry, I just can't pick up that you're... Yes, of course, please.
Thank you. What you just talked about, is that something I heard about on the National Behavioral Health Crisis Summit with Pew Tribal Trust? There's an organization from a different county, a different part of the country called Familiar Faces. Is that the program? They mentioned they were working with Larimer County. Are you working with other jurisdictions and learning from their program as well? I respect that.
I've heard of Familiar Faces just by the name, but I don't believe so.
Okay, thanks. They had mentioned they were working with Larimer County, and I was kind of excited to hear that. So I'll go back and circle back with that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there anything else?
No, at this time, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank everyone for an amazing and outstanding presentation. I'm so excited to hear about these programs and the work that you're doing for these individuals who need our support and care. And just want to commend you all for just the amazing work you do. Thank you.
Great.
so we are continuing to grow our competency programming, and one of the things that's coming is something we've referred to as a hub. Really for Summit Stone, that will be a place where all of our competency services are located. It will be partnered with some of our other high-intensity programming. So our competency services will be there, assertive community treatment, community dual diagnosis treatment, and intensive case management. And a piece of that is really about when these clients leave the competency system, they generally still need high-intensity services. And so if we can create a place where they are comfortable receiving services, the goal is to really be able to continue that post-criminal justice involvement. But that location will have our medical provider on site, including the nurses and medical assistants, therapists, case managers, space for our community partners to meet with clients, as well as space for them, for the evaluators to come in either virtually or in person. So just trying to create a space so that the clients can have a safe space to go to, similar to our AIM program, if you're familiar with that.
And before we get into the success stories, we want to just talk about what our future path looks like. And there's one thing that I would like to talk about that I'm really excited about. But we have been talking for the past 20 years to really look at behavioral health and criminal justice data sharing. And we've been trying to figure out how can we build a software program where criminal justice would have access and behavioral health would have access to individuals who are high utilizers to find out what resources they have to determine how they can really best serve that individual rather than just take them to jail. And we wrote a grant with the Impact Grant Fund from Larimer County, and we were successful. So we're very excited. We're starting a pilot program. We're starting small with the hope to go all throughout Larimer County, through all law enforcement entities, through all behavioral health entities. But at this point in time, we're developing a software program between Larimer County Sheriff's Department, which will be their co-responder program, their patrol, and the jail, as well as CJA, as well as Department of Human Services, really focusing on adult protection, and Summit Stone Health Partners, as well as our, and Lorenda, I can never get Josh's team's name. I always get it wrong.
It's performance, budget, and strategy.
Yes. And our IT group together to really develop a software where certain folks will see certain slides. Like I may only see demographics, but Summit Stone will be able to see an individual and know that they have an appointment next week. So when law enforcement connects them, law enforcement will know that maybe they have a case manager with Summit Stone and they can refer to them. Or maybe that individual does well with a co-responder specifically, and maybe that law enforcement will call that co-responder because last week they were contacted, and actually share data back and forth so that that person can be served the best way they can and the community can be safe at the same time. So we're looking forward to that, and we'll see how that works. A lot of it goes towards legal fees, just so you know, to figure out how we can navigate HIPAA and criminal justice. So we have experts that will be coming on board to give us that information on how we can do proper releases of information. So that's one thing that we're looking for in the future. I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the group for the other things. So.
I'll tackle two of these that are kind of interconnected. The first is neurocognitive evaluations. So a competency evaluation, as we talked about before, is just a snapshot that looks at meeting with the person for an hour to an hour and a half and asking, is this person competent to proceed at this point in time? It's not a fully in-depth neurocognitive evaluation, which is much more involved and goes into how the brain processes information and functions. And so an example would be, we had one person that was going through the competency process for a very long period of time, and this individual had suspected cognitive deficits, but they had never drilled down on what those were, how expansive they were. We were able to work with, through the help of Ms. Cosgrove, to get the state that if the initial competency evaluation flags it for concerns about cognitive functioning, and they say that further neuro testing would be helpful, then we were able to partner with a full neurocognitive evaluation. One example would be an individual that had been through the competency system several times in Weld County, then came over here and then got a neurocognitive evaluation that revealed a full-scale IQ of 55, which is many standard deviations below what somebody would be able to gain anything from competency restoration, but they had just sort of been passed on because they didn't have kind of that testing that had been done before. That segues into another initiative that I'm really excited about that we're working on right now, which is the juvenile competency docket. And so sort of the question for all of us is, how can we be as proactive as possible to catch this and move upstream to get these people resources as quick as possible? Like the example with Lynette, where when somebody's arrested, immediately we have that information. Well, even more ideal than that would be if when they do come into the system, if we already had the historical data from when they were juveniles. And a lot of times, the example I just gave you, that individual had gone through the juvenile system. They were so low in terms of their functioning that they didn't go to school regularly, so there weren't a lot of IEP records, and their family didn't have money to have any type of full neurocognitive testing. And so now we are trying to build out and build up a collaborative process with the juvenile competency docket, just like what we did here, to shift the focus to get those individuals that are juveniles the appropriate testing and resources so that A, they hopefully don't graduate into the adult criminal justice system, but B, if they do, we have that historical information so we can more quickly triage what the issue is and have off-ramps to get them out of the adult justice system.
Matt, if I may, question, please. Is there any way to determine any kind of correlation between this upstream interventions that you just described and how that might have prevented young people from going into the adult criminal justice system, and even to go so far as to say prevent violent crimes? Is there any way to?
I think just anecdotally, if you look at the individual I just shared with you, that individual never had the formal testing done. As a result, he didn't qualify for ARC or Foothills. So then many years later, we got their case dismissed in the adult competency realm, and we got them connected with long-term housing because they then qualified for those resources. Whereas they would have qualified 6 years before, but for the fact that their family didn't have the resources, there was no testing, and they had missed school. So I think that there's going to be, it's going to be much more proactive in terms of identifying these individuals and getting them connected with resources so that they don't graduate into the adult justice system.
I just wanted to jump into the process of getting a neurocognitive evaluation is very challenging. I mean, the wait list is huge. The places that offer them, are pretty backed up. Access to finding someplace that will take Medicaid to basically pay for the evaluation is a challenge. And so anything that's done to kind of streamline that and earlier on in life, because it helps people, their families themselves, understand why are we having a challenge. And when you talk about competency and they don't understand what the judge does, what the DA does, what their lawyer does, I mean, what is the point of sending someone to a facility to learn these things if you don't even quite have a correct picture of whether or not they're in a position to be able to learn this? So, I mean, when we're talking about $1,000 a day at the state hospital or $180 a day at our jail or what have you, I mean, that's $1 amount, but even just the humanity of an individual who is going to be put through that process when on the other side there's no fruit to be gained. I mean, the neuropsych evaluation is a game changer, and the earlier on you can capture that information, the better for the person.
If I may just add one more, this is obviously an area of interest for me, as you can tell, but one thing that's been really eye-opening to me on the juvenile side of the equation is that Larimer DHS has been a really great partner with HAVA to help have funding up front. There's a funding stream that's there on the juvenile side, and they have partnered for trauma assessments and testing through CSU. And so that's something that we're going to be utilizing a lot more to increase our juvenile numbers, because Judge Blanco is exactly right. If we're doing it on the back end in the adult system, it can be a 3 to 5 month wait even to get in the door to get that done. And so I'm very excited about the collaboration, and Magistrate Boxberger is helping to spearhead that. Thank you.
And I like to add something I'm excited about is kind of the last bullet is it's an idea for now, but Emily, Lynette, and I drove down to Denver, and there's an AID program, so it's assessment, intake, and diversion.
And our assistant county manager went with us.
And Lori Codridge. And it's an option besides the jail. Jail's always an option. The doors are always open, but this is a building that is open 10 hours a day. People can walk in from the streets, connect with a resource provider, referral. They have coffee, they have couches. But the beauty of it, they also work with the police and co-responders of Denver, and they know that's an option. If someone stole a Snickers bar, yes, you can take them to jail, but maybe they're just hungry and need resources, and you can walk them into this building. So it diverts, 5 to 10% of people that could be in the jail would be stuck in this process that would, best day would take 3 months to resolve. This is resolved in 10 minutes. So it's a deflection program. They don't even go through the jail. police just say, hey, instead of taking, why don't you go through the door, talk to a resource provider. So I think that would be a huge asset to Fort Collins if we could look into that as well.
And the AIDS Center was created by law enforcement. Law enforcement wanted a place to drop individuals off where they could get connected to resources that weren't necessarily going to go to the jail. We're looking at it as an opportunity potentially to work with Stone Soup. So Stone Soup has all of the nonprofits that are working together that are going into the jail, helping people as they re-enter. Wouldn't it be an opportunity to have space where an officer could drop someone off, but there would be office hours for 50 different nonprofits to come in with a calendar to say, hey, today we're working on housing, or we're working on sober living, or we're working on getting signed up for benefits, things of that nature. And so something to look for the future down the road. Looking potentially at ASD and the basement of ASD where there's more opportunities that maybe someone could stay there during the day for a little bit more stability. But those are things about looking at other partnerships, about what could we do differently that would even prevent them from going into to a deflection model that Mr. Oxmacher was talking about earlier.
I think the last piece on this slide, we've done a successful job of bouncing all over these bullet points in no particular order, but the civil commitment process, there's been changes in legislation, and, we are trying to figure out how to iron out criminal justice and civil practices so an individual doesn't have to be served in criminal justice if they could have short-term certification, long-term certification, involuntary medication management. And so you'll see at some of our meetings, we'll have Judge Lammons, we'll have Judge Finley, Summit Stone's Chief Medical Director is there as well, Dr. Brooks. And so we really are trying to be a little more collaborative in the community. Even before the changes came about, we have, since last December, been trying to put a whiteboard meeting together with all of those groups to say, what does the future of mental health look like in Larimer County? And that meeting is coming up in October, I believe. And trying to, it only took 10 months to get the meeting together, but it's happening because the discussion is, how do we take all of these different policies and areas of law and dissolve the barriers so that law just kind of meets the needs of the individual versus the individual having to fit into the categories to make it in front of the right place in the law where they might be served. And so it's neat to see the whole community coming together to see, what do we want to accomplish, what's next on the agenda. And so more to come on all of that, but that is another exciting piece that's coming up in October.
One of the things that I was thinking of when you were talking about the client that you had that was, kind of missed out on some of this testing and schooling, and then is how vulnerable people who, whether they have intellectual and developmental disabilities or, some chronic mental illness, how vulnerable they are in a criminal justice system, like sort of a traditional jail kind of, setting. And it struck me as like, they could, be more easily manipulated by others, or do things that aren't appropriate because they aren't aware of things. I guess I'm thinking of that piece, and the work you're doing is remarkable. I'm hugely supportive, but I do think about, how are they, if they're in jail awaiting, trial or that, how vulnerable they are in those kind of settings where it's not, their needs aren't necessarily being taken care of. And I don't think necessarily in our jail, but I think that that's not a good place for people who need to get better. And especially when we're talking about, lower level, situations, it just seems it's definitely not the place for folks to be, and so that's.
I agree, and I worked in the jail for 16 years, and that is a one-size-fits-all system. Unfortunately, a lot of these folks would be possibly housed alone due to mental health or behavior issues. A lot of these guys would be in the high-security area that's only out 2-3 hours a day because of these behavioral or cognitive issues. So I agree. I mean, what we're doing here is, again, trying to find personalized care and personalized success stories here. And I guess that's a transition.
Yeah, well, and I think about being housed alone. I mean, when you have mental illness, I mean, isolation is not an answer either. So, anyway, this is, I'm not, I'm preaching to the choir and saying, but I mean, that I have that concern as well as
Absolutely.
of how we're treating folks that are vulnerable and have problems. We can't treat everybody the same way, and so.
I agree.
Thank you.
And that is a perfect segue to talk about some of the successes that they've had, and they're pretty dynamic. So I'm going to turn it over to the team. They know which client is theirs, so probably Tracy's going to do a bunch of this, so.
Do I do that? Oh, yeah. So I'm Tracy Lowry. I work with Matt at the Public Defender's Office. Matt was one of the key players in developing the competency system, and I know you met him 3 years ago. But he has also worked hard to get another position in our office to assist with his docket. It is a big docket. I think between the two of us, we have like 300 cases, and this is a complicated population to meet with and to explain the system, the laws, assess for the mental health issues. So he applied for a grant through the Fines Committee, but he also advocated within our system, the state public defender system, to get another position to assist, and that helped bring in the misdemeanors. And this is definitely a different model, and this is definitely a different model from our system, and so that took quite a bit of advocacy to be able to teach our leadership that the adversarial system is not the only way to get the results that we are tasked to get. So I came into the docket about 1.5 years ago to give a hand, and I've worked in the criminal legal system for a long time, and in the 1.5 years I've been here, I'm just constantly just amazed, and it just warms my heart, some of the results that have come out of here, because we have usually just been involved only while the people are in court, and although we would love to be able to access these resources and set up our clients for success long term, we just simply don't have the bandwidth, the ability to access these resources, even the skill sets to be able to accomplish this. So when I learned that we have this huge competency team and these competency case managers, it just is such a relief to see the kind of results that come from that. So I think we've just shared here about 6 stories, but there are so many more I could think of. And we may not get to all of them, and they're not all my clients, but this first one is. And this was a client who identifies as a transgender male, basically a really Dickensian upbringing, really a horrific, a lot of trauma in their past. And when you talk about resources, this was a very high utilizer of the various hospitals, jail, mental health beds in around not just Larimer County, but the state. And so it's just extraordinarily expensive, obviously, on that level, but had persistent homelessness, untreated mental illness. And then what a lot of our clients do, of course, is that when they don't have consistent treatment for their mental health, they turn to street drugs for some relief, and then that creates a whole other issue. This person, like many of our clients, came into the system really from a mental health breakdown crisis issue at the time of their arrest. It's not a person that would normally have some criminal thinking, criminality, criminal behavior, but came in because of a mental health crisis, really struggled in the jail. I don't think we mentioned yet that the jail is a real partner in this. Mark Steiger, who is the director of behavioral health at the jail and works with Core Health, he comes to the staffings. the jail has so many responsibilities. They're not equipped to, be mental health case managers and communicate with family and medicine providers. And they really have made that such a key part of the process with Summit Stone's JBBS staff in the jail, and then Mark and his team, and now Dr. Ziegler. It's just, it starts basically from the moment they get there. So this person came into the jail, had a lot of behavioral issues due to trauma, due to the gender identity, and the jail did the best they could, but they were in isolated housing for some period of time. And as you were talking, Commissioner, that's exactly what happened. There was some deterioration. But the competency case manager, Anna Naplebaum, who's not here, but she's one of the case managers for Larimer County, and she's just done unbelievable work to find housing options and tried a lot of different ones. And what's fun about the housing options is that whenever anybody hears about a new one, like Denise would hear about some other new sober living, and she would invite them to the staffing so they could explain to us what kind of services. And I didn't even know about this housing program. I'm not sure I ever would have known. So the competency case manager, Anna, she found, after trying some other options, found a particular sober living that not only was specifically designated for LGBTQ plus individuals, but also had the intensive therapy that this person could not be successful without, because of JBBS in the jail, because of Mark. They were able to get the medications to do the transition. Anna actually drove this person down to the Denver area to get them, after picking up the medications, to get them started in the program, do the long-term Medicaid applications. Shannon's team was willing to invest in that first month while the long-term Medicaid gets set up and can pay it. They got this basic needs because, sober living is not providing those. And now this person is in a stable place for the first time in, a really long time. And then I have the faith and confidence that if they continue to be successful, Mr. Oxmacher and the DA's office are not going to be like, well, we just, put this person back in jail. I mean, they're going to want to see success long-term here as well. So we'll end up working out some kind of resolution, I'm sure.
So if I may, with the greatest respect for the extraordinary work that you all do, and not to diminish the importance of sharing success stories. We're supposed to be up at the YMCA at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And my phone says it'll take 1 hour and 18 minutes, and the traffic is light. So I don't know how we want to manage that, but I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Your own,
with the
yeah.
greatest respect, folks.
I agree. And there's some incredible success stories, so please take a look when you have an opportunity, especially this next one from California is pretty good. Not pretty good, amazing. This is probably one of my favorite ones. The one thing I would say before we leave, and I'll do it very quickly, just to honor this competency team. And when I say that is they have been awarded lots of different awards, not by their own asking, but people have recognized them. And it starts locally with our Human Relations Award in 2022 when we first began. But what's incredible is the partnership between the DA and the Public Defender's Office that normally is an adversarial setting. And Matt got Public Defender of the Year for the state of Colorado because of his work in the competency docket. And Amanda Duhan got Prosecutor of the Year because of her work in the competency docket. And I wanted to make sure that they got the recognition that they deserved. And then also the Visionary Award that you're already aware of, but that was a statewide award that was sprung on the competency team for the vision that created a movement, and I wanted to mention that. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Judge Blanco and the incredible awards that I know a portion of the awards she receives has to do with her work with competency and her forging a path that others haven't gone down. And that was her award as the Colorado Women's Bar Association Judicial Excellence Award, and now the Conrad Ball. And so I just wanted to put that out there. I know you have to go, but I wanted them to know how much we appreciate the work that they've done, and each individual makes a key piece of the puzzle to make this successful. So thank you. Out.
Thank you to you. Thanks to all of you. And Tricia, I don't mean to cutoff about the success stories, but it appears that we may have to get on the road. Commissioner Stevens, any closing comments or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for coming back. When you said we hadn't had information about this for 3 years, I was like, well, good. That's probably why I don't remember some of this. But clearly, in the past 3 years, you've not only continued the work, but you've really expanded the work and created new partnerships that have really advanced the work. And you're still envisioning how to do it better. And setting the example, obviously, for not only communities around Colorado, but other states to do this work. And so I appreciate your thoughtfulness. I appreciate the way that you're approaching this. I mean, this isn't, it's not easy to do this work because it does take so many people to take the time to do this right. And so I just really want to thank you all for your commitment to doing this, to creating resources and a space where people can, become competent, to get the help that they need, the treatment they need, and it's just very important for not only our community safety, but it's really important to help people in our community get through this process, which can be really confusing and difficult and penalizes sometimes people that through no fault of their own have fallen into this system. And so I'm just really grateful. I really, I feel like, sometimes as a commissioner, you feel like you want to put this program in place and you just say, do it, or yes, go ahead, or here's the money. And then you do all the hard work and then we sort of reap the benefits from that. But in this case, I think the whole community reaps the benefits from that because, what you're doing is unique. But it is absolutely the right thing to do. And so I could say it a million different ways, but just really grateful for the work. Let us know how we can continue to support. If there's things that come up at the state level that we need to support with regard to funding or otherwise, we are happy to do that. And I am grateful to live in such a compassionate and innovative community, and you all make that happen. And so I know you don't do it for the awards. Congratulations, kudos on all the awards. I know you do it because you care, and I thank you for that.
Is Commissioner Shattuck McNally? I don't know how to tell. Otherwise, pardon? I can't tell. So I agree with everything she said. I won't repeat it. Question that I have, maybe we can have a conversation offline, is I sent this slide presentation to two of my fellow commissioners in Routt County, Summit County, Summit County and Bent County. So question for further discussion offline is, do those counties have something similar? And related to that is, what does it take to start a competency docket, and what capacity do we have, to provide that technical assistance? So something to think about. I think that's all I have to say. Lorinda, anything? Usually you have some wise words at the very end.
No pressure. I think what I'll just say is this is a team effort, obviously, and the team continues to grow. I think that's what makes Larimer County a really special community, is finding gaps and filling them in with whoever does that service best. We don't have to be the ones, you don't have to be the ones, but it takes a whole group of people to make it happen. Every time Emily comes to me and says, we have an idea, I can't wait to hear what comes next, because she's probably already figured out a funding source, a way to write a grant for it, a way to seek some sort of support from someone else to get it done. And I appreciate that kind of overarching leadership around how do we challenge what we do? How do we meet people where they need to be met so that we are a better community for it? So thank you, all of you. It's a pleasure to work with each of you. And Emily, thank you for kind of keeping the balls in the air and not letting things fall down and developing these relationships, because that's what it's all about, how we work together and how we can meet folks. So thank you.
Thank you, Lorinda. Thank you, colleagues. It's 11:48 a.m. and we are adjourned. We'll make sure to read more, again, the success stories so that they are implanted in us. Thank you all.